I, 45F, have been supporting my parents financially for the past 20 years. My husband Michael, 48M, and I both have successful careers. I'm a marketing director at a major corporation, and he's a senior investment banker. We've worked hard to build our lives and maintain a comfortable lifestyle. The situation with my parents began deteriorating about 20 years ago. Dad, 73M, had his work hours cut significantly, and Mom, 70F, had to reduce her workload due to severe arthritis. Being the responsible daughter I am, I stepped in to help by taking over their mortgage payments. It was a substantial commitment, but Michael and I could manage it with our combined income. Last weekend, everything changed at my younger sister Megan's, 35F, wedding. Michael and I had already contributed significantly to the wedding expenses, and we had a $12,000 check ready as a wedding gift. The ceremony was beautiful, but during the reception, my parents dropped a bombshell that left me frozen in my seat. My mother stood up, champagne glass in hand, and with tears of joy announced, "David, Megan, your father and I want to give you something special to start your new life together." She pulled out some papers from her purse. "We're giving you our family home as your wedding present." The room erupted in applause. I sat there, completely stunned. Michael's hand tightened around mine under the table. The house, the same house whose mortgage I had been paying for 2 decades, was being given away without a single word of consultation with me. What made it worse was Megan's reaction. She wasn't surprised at all. She was crying happy tears and hugging our parents while her new husband David, 38M, stood there with his mouth hanging open. She had known about this all along. I managed to maintain my composure throughout the reception, but inside, I was seething. 20 years of monthly payments, of sacrificing my own financial goals to help my parents, and this is how they repaid me? The drive home that night was tense. "I can't believe they did this," I finally broke down once we were in our car. 20 years, Michael. 20 years I've been paying that mortgage, and they didn't even have the decency to discuss this with me first. "We need to look into the legal aspects of this," Michael said quietly, his investment banker mind already working on solutions. "They can't just give away a house you've been paying for." Over the next few days, memories kept flooding back. When I graduated college, my parents gave me a $50 gift card. When Megan graduated 3 years later, they bought her a car. When I got my first promotion, they skipped my celebration dinner because Megan had a volleyball game, not even a championship, just a regular season game. Then yesterday, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me hoped for an explanation, maybe even an apology. Instead, what I got was another shock. "Catherine, honey," she said as if nothing had happened, "since we've given the house to Megan and David, your father and I have been thinking. We'd like to move into your vacation home. You barely use it anyway, and it would be perfect for our retirement." The vacation home she was referring to is a lakeside cottage I bought with my own money before I even met Michael. I had saved for years, working overtime and weekends, to afford it. It was my personal sanctuary. "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice level. "You gave away the house I've been paying the mortgage on for 20 years without consulting me, and now you want to move into my vacation home?" "Don't be difficult, Catherine," my mother sighed. "Where else are we supposed to go?" I hung up the phone. After hanging up, I walked to my home office and sat down at my desk, staring at the family photo from last Christmas. 20 years of memories flooded through my mind. I remembered the day I took over the mortgage payments. I was 25, just starting to climb the corporate ladder at my marketing firm. Dad had called me in tears, something I'd never heard before, explaining how they might lose the house. I still remember that conversation clearly. "Catherine, honey," he'd said, his voice breaking. "We don't know what to do. The bank, they're threatening foreclosure." Without hesitation, I'd offered to help. I was young, ambitious, and believed in family loyalty above all else. Michael, then my fiancé, had supported my decision despite his initial concerns. Over the years, that monthly mortgage payment became a constant reminder of my obligations. $2,800 every month, without fail. Even when we were saving for our own house, even when I had medical bills after my car accident in 2015, even when Michael and I were trying to build our retirement fund, that payment always came first. I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial records. The numbers were staggering. In 20 years, I had paid over $670,000 toward their house. That's not counting the other small helps, grocery money when times were tight, repairs for their car, new appliances when the old ones broke down. All while Megan pursued her dreams of becoming a lifestyle influencer, bouncing between jobs, and living rent-free in our parents' basement until she met David. The sound of Michael's footsteps pulled me from my calculations. He entered my office with 2 glasses of wine and a concerned expression. "I've been making some calls," he said, sitting down across from me. "Kate, there's something you need to know about Megan and the house." I took a sip of wine, noting the serious tone in his voice. "What did you find?" "Well, for starters, the house isn't exactly free and clear. There's a second mortgage on it that your parents took out 3 years ago. They never told you because they knew you'd ask questions." He pulled out his tablet and showed me some documents. "But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what they did with that money." My hand started to shake as I read through the documents. The second mortgage was for $150,000. According to the records Michael had uncovered, almost all of it had gone to paying off Megan's credit card debt and funding her influencer lifestyle, expensive clothes, luxury vacations, cosmetic procedures, all while she was supposedly building her brand. "There's more," Michael continued, scrolling through his findings. "David doesn't know about any of this. From what I can tell, he thinks Megan's social media presence is actually profitable. He has no idea about the debt, the second mortgage, or the fact that your parents have been bankrolling her lifestyle." I felt a cold clarity settling over me. So they didn't just give away a house I was paying for, they gave away a house with a massive second mortgage that I didn't even know about, all to cover up Megan's financial disasters? Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. Michael leaned forward. "Your parents' retirement fund? It's practically empty. They've been pulling money out for years to support Megan. That's why they want your vacation home. They're not just being entitled, they're desperate." As this information sank in, something shifted inside me. 20 years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always helped out, and this was how they repaid me. My parents had not only betrayed my trust but had been actively working against my interests to support my sister's irresponsible behavior. "You know what this means, don't you?" Michael asked quietly. "When the truth about the second mortgage and Megan's debt comes out, David's going to want answers. And when he starts asking questions." I nodded slowly, a plan already forming in my mind. "Everything will unravel." Michael reached across the desk and took my hand. "Kate, whatever you decide to do, I'm with you. But we need to be smart about this. We need to think strategically." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his support. "I think it's time we put my marketing expertise and your financial knowledge to good use. If they want to play games with money and property, well, I've learned from the best in the business world. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions to protect yourself." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I'd sacrificed for my family. The vacations Michael and I had postponed, the renovation projects we'd delayed, the extra hours I'd worked, all to keep up with that mortgage payment. And all along, my parents had been enabling Megan's reckless spending and poor life choices. I got up around 3 a.m. and went to my home office. For the next few hours, I meticulously documented everything, every payment I'd made, every financial sacrifice, every instance of my parents favoring Megan. I created spreadsheets, gathered bank statements, and organized everything chronologically. If I was going to take action, I needed to be prepared. As the sun rose, I looked out my office window at the city skyline. In the corporate world, I'd learned that timing is everything. You don't just react, you plan, you prepare, and you wait for the perfect moment to make your move. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Catherine, we need to discuss the vacation home situation. Your father and I have already started packing. Don't make this difficult." I smiled as I read the message. They had no idea what was coming. After all, I hadn't spent 20 years in corporate marketing without learning how to manage a crisis and control a narrative. And if there's one thing I knew for certain, it was that some of the most devastating revelations come not from what you say, but from what you strategically let others discover on their own. I'll update soon with how things progress. Let's just say that sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served strategically. Update 1, it's been 2 weeks since my last post, and things have escalated far beyond what I expected. Grab your popcorn, this gets intense. I was in the middle of a marketing presentation when my phone buzzed with an alert from my vacation home's security system. Motion detected, front door opened. My blood ran cold. I quickly checked the camera feed and there they were, my parents, using their emergency spare key to let themselves in. I immediately called the security company, who dispatched local police. Then I called Michael. They're actually doing it, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. They're trying to move in without permission. An hour later, I received a call from Officer Martinez. Ma'am, we found your parents attempting to move furniture into the property. They claim they have permission to be here. They absolutely do not, I replied firmly. I'd like to press charges. What happened next was like a scene from a movie. Michael and I drove up to the vacation home to find my parents sitting on the front steps with several suitcases, being questioned by police officers. My mother's face was tear-stained, but I recognized those tears, they were the same ones she used to guilt me into doing things her way for decades. Here's where it gets really interesting. While the police were processing my parents' trespassing charges, Michael received an urgent call from David, Megan's husband. Apparently, the bank had contacted him about missed payments on the second mortgage, the one my parents never told me about. Kate, David's voice was tight with barely controlled anger when I called him back. Did you know about Megan's shopping addiction? The credit card debt? The fact that she's been lying to me about her influencer income for our entire relationship? I stayed silent, letting him continue. Sometimes the best strategy is to let others discover the truth on their own. She's spent over $200,000 in the past 2 years alone, he continued, his voice breaking. Your parents have been covering it up, taking out loans, emptying their retirement accounts. The house they gave us. It's underwater with debt. And now I find out she's been hiding bills in her car, taking out credit cards in my name. I could hear Megan screaming in the background, something about how I'd ruined everything by not letting our parents move into my vacation home. David's voice got quieter, more controlled. I've contacted a divorce attorney. I can't be married to someone who would do this. While all this was unfolding, my parents were being processed at the local police station. I had the locksmith change all the locks on my vacation home and installed a new security system. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. I blocked my parents' numbers and sent a certified letter to Megan and David's address, my old family home, stating that any attempt by my parents or sister to contact me would be considered harassment and dealt with legally. The next day, my mother tried a different approach. She posted a long, dramatic message on Facebook about being abandoned by her eldest daughter in their time of need. I waited exactly 1 hour, watching the sympathetic comments roll in, before posting my response, a detailed account of every payment I'd made, every sacrifice I'd endured, and every manipulation I'd suffered, complete with scanned documents and bank statements. The fallout was nuclear. Family members who'd sided with my parents suddenly went quiet. Megan's carefully curated social media presence imploded as people realized her luxury lifestyle had been built on debt and deception. David moved out of the house that same night. But here's the real kicker, remember that second mortgage my parents took out? Turns out they didn't just use it to cover Megan's shopping addiction. They'd also been running a small-scale investment scam, promising returns to family friends and using the house as collateral. Now those friends are coming forward, demanding their money back. I'm watching it all unravel from a safe distance. Michael and I have hired additional security for our home, just in case. Tomorrow, we have a meeting with our lawyers to discuss protecting our assets and ensuring my parents can never again try to claim my properties. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you do, it's about standing back and letting people face the consequences of their own actions. I'll update again when there's more to share, but for now, I'm finally sleeping peacefully at night. Update 2, 3 weeks after my parents' arrest, things have taken an even darker turn. What started as a family property dispute has spiraled into something that looks more like a true crime documentary. Yesterday, I received an unexpected visit at my office from Agent Thompson of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. "Mrs. Catherine," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "we need to discuss your parents' investment activities." It turns out that second mortgage wasn't their only financial scheme. The FBI had been investigating a series of suspicious investments in our area, and my parents' names kept coming up. They had been running an elaborate Ponzi scheme, using their reputation in the community to convince people to invest in non-existent property developments. "We've traced over $2 million in fraudulent investments," Agent Thompson explained, showing me a folder of documents. "Your sister Megan was acting as their unofficial accountant, using her social media influence to lend credibility to the scheme." My hands shook as I flipped through the evidence. Bank statements, wire transfers, forged documents, all pointing to a sophisticated fraud operation run right out of my childhood home. The same home I'd been paying the mortgage on for 20 years. But the real shock came when Agent Thompson revealed the list of victims. Aunt Clara had invested her entire retirement fund. My cousin Tom had mortgaged his farm. Even my old high school teacher, Mrs. Anderson, had invested her late husband's life insurance money. "We've found evidence that this has been going on for at least 5 years, Agent Thompson continued. "The question is, did you have any knowledge of these activities?" "Absolutely not," I replied firmly, my marketing director instincts kicking in. "I've been estranged from my family since they attempted to take over my vacation property. I've been cooperating with local law enforcement regarding their trespassing charges." Just then, my phone buzzed with an urgent text from Michael, "Turn on the local news now." I pulled up the news stream on my computer. There was Megan, being led out of her house in handcuffs, mascara running down her face. The headline read, "Local influencer arrested in connection with multi-million-dollar investment fraud." Agent Thompson watched the broadcast with me. "Your sister tried to clean out several accounts this morning. She nearly made it to the airport with $500,000 in cashier's checks. After the FBI left, I sat in my office, trying to process everything. My phone was exploding with messages from family members and friends who had invested with my parents. Their desperate pleas for information made my heart ache, but I couldn't help them." That evening, Michael and I were having dinner when our home security system alerted us to someone at the front door. Through the camera, we saw David, looking exhausted and desperate. "I need your help," he said when we let him in. "Megan, she's done something terrible. Something even worse than the fraud." He pulled out his phone and showed us a series of emails. Megan had been secretly recording our parents' meetings with investors, planning to use the footage as leverage if things went south. But she hadn't just recorded the fraud, she'd captured conversations about other illegal activities. "Your parents," David's voice cracked, "they've been involved in real estate fraud across 3 states. They've been forging documents, stealing identities. Megan has it all on video. She's threatening to release everything unless I drop the divorce proceedings and lie to the FBI about her involvement." Michael immediately called our lawyer, while I sat with David, watching his world crumble. "I loved her," he whispered. "I thought I knew her." Just then, breaking news flashed across the TV. "Breaking, local investment scandal grows, police uncover links to international money laundering operation." The camera showed my parents' house, my old family home, swarming with FBI agents. Evidence bags were being carried out. Neighbors stood in their driveways, watching in shock. My phone rang. It was Agent Thompson again. "Mrs. Catherine, we need you to come in tomorrow morning. We've found something in your parents' records that you need to see. It concerns your mortgage payments over the past 20 years. I'll update again when I know more." Michael's hired additional security for our home, and we've moved our important documents to a secure location. Something tells me this is about to get even bigger. Update 3, 6 months have passed since my last update, and I'm finally ready to share how everything concluded. A lot has happened, and sitting here in my new corner office on the 48th floor, looking out over the city skyline, I can hardly believe how much my life has changed. let me start with what the FBI found. Remember those mortgage payments I'd been making for 20 years? Turns out my parents had been doctoring the paperwork. They weren't just accepting my payments, they were also claiming them as investment returns to show their fraud victims. Every single payment I made had been used to perpetuate their Ponzi scheme. The morning I met with Agent Thompson, she laid out years of falsified documents across her desk. "Mrs. Catherine," she said, "your parents used your financial support to create the illusion of successful investments. They leveraged your reliability to lure in more victims." The investigation revealed that my parents had defrauded over 200 people across 3 states, totaling nearly $15 million. The scandal made national news. My mother and father are now serving 25-year sentences in federal prison. The judge showed no leniency, particularly given their attempts to pin everything on Meghan. Speaking of Meghan, her trial was last month. Those recordings she tried to use as leverage against David? They became the prosecution's key evidence. She's been sentenced to 12 years for her role in the scheme, with additional charges pending for attempted extortion and identity theft. David filed for an annulment rather than divorce, on the grounds of fraud. The courts granted it, along with a restraining order after Meghan tried to threaten him from jail. He's since moved to Seattle for a fresh start, and we occasionally exchange emails. He's doing better now, seeing a therapist and slowly rebuilding his life. The family home, the one I spent 20 years paying for, was seized by the federal government as part of the asset forfeiture. The FBI's forensic accountants determined that I was an unwitting victim of the fraud scheme and helped me file a claim to recover my payments. Last week, I received a settlement check for $1.2 million, representing my mortgage payments plus interest. But the most significant changes in my life aren't about money or justice, they're about personal growth and new beginnings. 3 months ago, I was promoted to Global Chief Marketing Officer of my company. The board specifically cited my grace under pressure during the family scandal as evidence of my leadership capabilities. It turns out that maintaining my professional composure while my family drama made national news impressed a lot of people. Michael has been incredible throughout all of this. His support never wavered, and his expertise in financial investigations proved invaluable to the FBI. He's since been recruited by a prestigious firm specializing in forensic accounting, where he helps other fraud victims recover their assets. We've sold my vacation home, too many bad memories, and bought a beautiful beach house in a different state. It's our fresh start, our new sanctuary. Last weekend, we hosted our first dinner party there with our closest friends, and for the first time in decades, I felt completely at peace. The extended family members who initially sided with my parents have mostly come around, sending apologetic messages and trying to reconnect. I've politely but firmly declined. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. I've learned that family isn't about blood, it's about trust, respect, and mutual support. My company recently sent me to speak at a conference about corporate ethics and fraud prevention. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood at the podium, sharing how personal experience had shaped my understanding of financial manipulation and the importance of due diligence. My session had the highest attendance of the conference, and I've since been invited to speak at several other events. I've also started mentoring young professional women, teaching them the importance of maintaining financial independence and recognizing manipulation. One of my ments recently asked me if I regret not seeing the signs of my family's fraud earlier. I told her what I've come to believe: sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most valuable truths. Michael and I have established a foundation that provides legal and financial support to victims of family fraud. We've already helped 3 families navigate situations similar to what we experienced. It's healing to transform our painful experience into something that helps others. Last week, I received a letter from my mother in prison. She wrote about regret, about missing me, about hoping for forgiveness. I read it once, then shredded it. Some people confuse forgiveness with forgetting, and I have no intention of doing either. My peace comes not from reconciliation, but from closure. The media occasionally still runs stories about the case, usually when new victims come forward or when there's a development in the ongoing investigations. I no longer read them. That chapter of my life is closed, filed away like old case documents in the FBI's archives. My new office has no family photos on the walls. Instead, I've decorated it with art that Michael and I collected during our recent travels. Each piece represents a new memory, untainted by the past. My assistant knows not to put through any calls from unknown numbers, and my email filters automatically archive anything from my former family members. This morning, I had breakfast on our beach house terrace, watching the sunrise with Michael. We talked about our upcoming vacation to the Maldives, about the new project I'm leading at work, about the sailing lessons we're planning to take. Not once did we mention my parents, Megan, or the past. I've learned that success isn't just about professional achievements or financial security, it's about having the courage to cut toxic ties and the wisdom to build something better in their place. My life now is filled with genuine relationships, meaningful work, and plans for a future untethered from familial obligation. To those who followed my story from the beginning, thank you for your support. To those facing similar situations, trust your instincts, protect yourself, and don't let anyone, family or not, manipulate your kindness. Sometimes the happiest endings come not from fixing what's broken, but from building something entirely new.